Jamie, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we have some important business we're going to do on stage a little bit later, but I want to start by finishing the conversation we just had on stage about 2020 and the South Carolina Democratic primary.
Now, the most important primary.
Well, I can say this as someone who worked for Barack Obama: he wouldn't have been president without the South Carolina Democratic primary.
To that.
So, you're an activist here. You're talking to activists. What are the voters, the Democratic primary voters here in South Carolina, what are they looking for in a 2020 candidate?
I think they're looking for someone who's genuine, someone who's inspirational, someone who's hopeful, and someone who can beat Donald Trump.
And a bunch of the candidates have been through here. I know you've been talking to all of them. I read in the New York Times Elizabeth Warren called you, gave some advice about running here. What are you telling candidates about how to win in South Carolina?
Well, the first thing that I tell them is that you can't mail it in. And what do I mean by that? Meaning that, you can't just send in staffers from other states just because you're a black woman from Tennessee. You think, oh, well, we can send her down and she can be the state director in South Carolina. No, that doesn't work. They have different barbecue in Tennessee. So it doesn't translate easily. You need to, my grandmother is always my gauge for things in politics. And so if you go and knock on her door, she has a few questions for you. First, she says, well, she's looking out the window to peek and see what kind of car you drive. Then second of all, she'll open the door and she said, well, who are you? Where are you from? And who are your people? That sense of commonality and building some kinship is really, really important. And so I'm looking for these candidates, not just to spend all their time in Iowa and New Hampshire, but to come here to South Carolina, to get to know the voters here in South Carolina, have them ask the questions, because South Carolina looks like the Democratic Party. South Carolina looks like America. And it's important for them to really test their messages and to test their outreach in this state.
And I know a bunch of them have been down here. Some are coming this upcoming weekend. Is there anyone you've seen who has been impressive in what they're saying or how they're thinking about it or how they're organizing the state?
Well, listen, let me put this out. I'm a DNC officer, so therefore, whatever I say, I am not endorsing anybody. I'm not saying
this is only between us in the room here. No one else will know. It's fine.
There have been a number of candidates, and I always say it this way. There have been a number of candidates that have really been working hard to get to know South Carolina, to get to know the leaders in South Carolina, the community leaders in South Carolina, and hiring South Carolina staff. And they're making great inroads in that. And so my encouragement for the other folks, those candidates who don't fit that description,
but you know who you are if you don't fit that.
You know who you are, you need to step up your game. Because in the end of the day, it's going to be about the people who put the roots in the ground and they water it and they plant it and they talk to it every now and then and they tend it. And by February 29th, it is a full-grown plant. And that's really, really important.
So like the Chia Pet strategy.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Okay.
You need a Chia Pet strategy.
Yes. And so the traditional path has been Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. And then that in South Carolina was always the launch pad into these like Super Tuesday and these other huge multi-state primary days. This year, California has moved up.
Yes.
And is right on the heels of South Carolina. Do you worry that diminishes the influence?
I don't. Partly, and I can tell it's not diminishing the influence because we've actually seen more candidates come to South Carolina now than they did in the entirety of 2016. I mean, Hillary and Bernie only came here a few times, but Corey, Kamala, and a number of them have been in South Carolina already four times. And I expect to see them here a lot. So I think it's really, really good, and it's good for our state. I think South Carolina is coming into its own as it relates to presidential primary politics, particularly on the Democratic side. So, having California come in just means South Carolina is that more important. Because in the end of the day, South Carolina is on February 29th. Super Tuesday is then that 3 days later on March 2nd, that Tuesday. Well, what's going to happen is the people who will come in first and second in South Carolina will get all of this free television publicity in that time. And voters, are creatures of habit. They're going to look at who has the momentum, and many of them will say, well, I sort of like this person. They just won South Carolina, so maybe I need to vote for them. So I think South Carolina just becomes more significant because Super Tuesday is now super duper on steroids Tuesday.
So there's another election
Yes.
in South Carolina in 2020.
Yes, there
So
is.
Is there anything you would like to tell us about your plans for that election?
I agree. It is time for Lindsey Graham to come home. Listen, if you've never seen a black man blush, you just saw one right now. I don't think I would have ever in my life, if you told me a few years ago that, Jamie, you will agree with George Will on something. I would have, it was like, I would have been like Joe Wilson, you lie, right?
Yeah.
But George Will, if you have not seen the op-ed that he wrote about Lindsey Graham that ran in the Washington Post recently, I mean, it just blows your socks off. But he called Lindsey Graham an opportunist, but he called him a political windsock. I never, ever want in my history to ever be known as a windsock, and definitely not as a political windsock. But I want you all to know, I mean, not that it's a preview because, the newspapers are...
No, this is the first time we're making this news here. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you this. I will be announcing an exploratory committee to run for the United States Senate against Lindsey Graham. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are awesome. And I just want you to know this, that for me, this isn't about playing games. Right now, in very soon, our house will add another little body to it. I grew up here in South Carolina, in Orangeburg, right down the road. The roads that you drive on, my grandfather helped to pave. My grandmother worked in the textile industry. My mother had me when she was 16 years old, and my life has been the American dream. I have lived the American dream, coming from one of the most impoverished places to actually now saying that I'm going to explore a run for the United States Senate. That only happens in America. That only happens in America. And when I think about some of the towns that I've gone through in South Carolina, and I know many of you have driven through these little towns and you see that they're shuttered, that you see the downtown just, it's sad. I remember as a kid going through those same towns and they were vibrant. The problem that we have in South Carolina is that we have these little bastions of hope. I grew up of hopelessness rather. I grew up in the area that they call the corridor of shame. I wouldn't want to be a senator representing a state like South Carolina that has a corridor of shame. And the thing that I'm writing about is not, and tweeting about, it's not about the fact that the water in Denmark looks as brown as my shoe, or that the terrorists are killing our farmers or small businesses, or that 4 rural hospitals have closed in the state, or that there are babies being separated from their parents at the border. You know what our senator writes about? It is the manner in which Roger Stone was arrested. You know what our senator cares about? It's his tea time with Donald Trump. It is time here in South Carolina that we have somebody that we send to Washington, D.C., that is looking at making sure that the doors of opportunity and the doors of that hope is still a part of the American dream, and it's vibrant right here in South Carolina. And so that is what I want to fight for.
So I'm glad you brought up Lindsey Graham. And when Barack Obama was first elected and we were working in the White House, Lindsey Graham was in the White House every day. He was in there to talk to Barack Obama about how he's going to help him pass immigration reform. He was going to help us pass climate change bill. He was going to help Barack Obama close Guantanamo. Then some Republican senators lost some primaries, and we haven't seen that Lindsey Graham in a while.
No.
So, and now Lindsey Graham went from someone who said Donald Trump would be an embarrassment if he won to trying to muscle Don Jr. out to get in the will. And so my question is for someone who's seen him all day listening in South Carolina, what is up with Lindsey Graham?
Listen, I don't know. I don't know what they're feeding him or what's in the water in the Senate, but somebody please get him away from that bottle because there's something going on with him. I mean, listen, this is a guy in a 2-year stint who called Donald Trump, what was it, a racist, bigoted, xenophobic, religious bigot, right? Like all of that.
Yeah.
And now Donald Trump is his BFF. Yeah. I mean, literally, if you look up like love on the phone and Donald Trump pops up and it has a little jingle or whatever, oh, there's my best friend forever, Donald Trump. I mean, it's just crazy. And those two things can't coexist. You can't think somebody's a racist bigot and then you want to make sure you're golfing with them and you're having lunch with them and dinner with them. It says to me, hearing about Lindsey being at the White House during Barack Obama's time, is that this guy just wants to be relevant. He doesn't care about the people here in South Carolina. He just wants to be relevant. He wants to be in front of a TV camera. He wants to be in front of a microphone. That's fine. I can give you a TV camera and a microphone, Lindsey, and you can stay in your house in Seneca all damn year. I don't care.
So, Jamie, it's been a while since South Carolina has elected a Democratic senator.
A long time.
Like, not this century, I think.
We've been in the wilderness for a long time.
Help everyone here understand why this time could be different.
Listen, one of the things that we really have to do, part of the problem that we have here in South Carolina is not just a problem that's unique to South Carolina. It's across the South. Nationally, the Democratic Party has just, until recently, and I applaud Tom, who I work with at the DNC, because he has reinstated Howard Dean's 50-state strategy and started investing in Southern parties. And that's how we won with Doug Jones in Alabama and a number of other
Joe Cunningham here. Yeah.
Joe Cunningham here, exactly. That's exactly right. And so what we have to do is we have to get our folks here energized again and give them some hope that Democrats can actually do it. And Joe actually did give us hope. Yeah. But the second step of it is that we have to convince national Democrats that they can't just leave us out here fighting by ourselves. If you take a look at what happens is, and Republicans are very strategic, they fight everywhere. Look at Massachusetts, Maine, Maryland, blue states, right? Blues are the blue states, but what do they have in common? Republican governors. That's because Republicans don't cede any territory to us. But the Democratic Party, on the other hand, will say, well, South Carolina, we can't win. Alabama, we can't win. Mississippi, we can't win. The Idaho and Kansas, we can't win. And we'll just cede that over to the Republicans. And we only fight in these, the marginal states or the swing states or blue states. Well, those same red states are sending 2 U.S. senators to Washington, D.C., and the policies that those U.S. senators are voting on, the judges that they're voting on, have an impact on every single person in this country. We can't cede any territory to them. We have to fight on these grounds, and they're good Democrats in the South, and we can win if they invest in us.
Jamie, thank you so much.